So as Jet mentioned, I'm a designer, a UX designer. I work at Nodejitsu, a company which does cloud orchestration software in Node. I also organize JavaScript meetups in Poland, in Krakow. And I also help run the Node firm, which is a Node.js evangelism company, sort of, kind of. So to hell with jQuery, right? I mean, jQuery sucks. Are you a real programmer or jQuery programmer, right? Am I right? Are you agreeing with me? Who agrees with me? OK. No. Like, are you insane? Man. OK, let me tell you a story. I'm a designer. I'm not a JavaScript developer, which is kind of weird because I'm at JSConf, right? So when I started designing, watch out. When I started designing, I also started thinking, OK, so I should be able to code my designs, right? I think that every designer has come to this conclusion, right? So I started coding. I learned front-end, CSS, HTML, and then I started working at Nodejitsu. So Nodejitsu is a really cool company, and they're full of really good Node.js developers contributing to core, really awesome people. So I thought, maybe I should learn how to do JavaScript, right? Because it doesn't make sense if I don't. So I started programming. And this made me think about the tools that I'm using on my daily basis. Because if you're a designer, usually you are using Photoshop. That's natural. Photoshop is the base for your work. On the other hand, Photoshop is really a mysterious black box. We have no idea how it works. Sometimes it crashes, is doing really, 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 really weird things. And you don't necessarily know why it's happening. You just get this weird message or spinning wheel. Oops, it crashed. OK, let me restart and start working again. So we cannot debug Photoshop errors, right? So it's a black box. On the other hand, the web is not a black box. The nature of the web says that, and the software itself, it's very different. It's open. And we have this amazing thing, the ability to view the source, which is a very, very, very powerful tool. It was very hard a few years ago when we had no GitHub. It was very hard to check how it works, learn from code. But then there was GitHub, and now we are able to read the code, which is so awesome. We can learn a lot. So this makes me think about the root cause of this problem. Is jQuery crappy? Are other libraries crappy? So it all comes down to two kinds of people, operators and engineers. Operator is a person who knows how to use a tool. OK, so I can take a toaster and make a toast. Like, everyone can do that. It's so easy. But do I know how it works? Not necessarily. I just know how to use it. I just know how to make a toast. An engineer knows how the thing works from the ground up, so he can modify. He can adjust it for their needs. He has full awareness of the code. So we should aim towards being engineers, right? Everyone is saying, read the fucking manual, right? We all know this expression. But it leads us to a question, which is, do we actually read the code? Who read jQuery code base? That's actually surprising, but still, it's like 10% or 20, maybe. How many of you read the code base of every library you are using? Ooh, nice. It's like 10 people, and it's probably like 100 in the room or more. So for me, read the fucking code is then you read the fucking manual. It's kind of a generalization, but the internet is giving us this opportunity to bitch about things, right? Usually you go and like, oh my god, this website is so awful, or this software, I had this terrible experience with that product. So it gives this freedom for people to complain. Not necessarily while being anonymous. You can just sign in and bitch about it on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. But mostly, it's about people being really lazy. Because as you've seen, 10 people said that they're actually reading the code base when they're using a library. So we are kind of lazy. We don't care about checking the code we are using. So basically, we're using a tool without knowing how it works. And how we are in position to judge the software or the library, we don't necessarily know how it works. So is it the hype? Because it's a very hype opinion. jQuery sucks. Everyone knows that, right? So the human factor makes it worse. So we established that it's really valuable to read the code. What are the benefits of it? So libraries are trying to solve a lot of problems, a very broad spectrum usually, which naturally affects the level of complexity. So you're not actually sure how much complexity you're willing to take on you when you're choosing a library, because you're not reading the code. You're just like, OK, I have this client, and he wanted this fancy date picker, so I found this cool library, which is doing fancy date pickers. So we just use it, and whatever, it works. It's nice and fancy. But this really affects the complexity you're willing to deal with. And this is also a problem of cognitive load, which is translated to the difficulty associated with the understanding of a certain concept. So should libraries really be that complex? Should they solve that many issues? Or should they be more specialized? For me, kind of the idea of a library is that it's addressing one issue, or maybe a few small issues, not like, oh, let's just put Ajax in jQuery because Ajax is so cool, so let's put it there. But why, on the other hand? So maybe they should not follow the all-in-one concept. On the other hand, while reading the code of a library, we can see some good patterns. Usually, libraries are written by good developers, like Paul Irish, for example, of course. And we can notice the good patterns, we can benefit from that, we can learn, because not all of us are really great programmers, right? On the other hand, some parts may be really, really over-engineered, may be very complicated, unnecessarily. And we all strive for simplicity. The solution we may take is to choose a micro-framework over a library. Because I've said the library is usually huge. It's kind of framework-ish. And micro-framework has usually modular approach, is very lightweight, is addressing a specific issue. For example, if you go to Micro.js website, you have these all really tiny libraries which will work great for mobile. They're easy to understand because the code base is smaller. On the other hand, libraries have some benefits too. They're well tested. They have better cross-browser compatibility. They have backtracking software, more documentation. Sometimes they're more reliable for production. So to not to keep this talk only inspirational, let's do some examples. I said to how legit with jQuery, but jQuery is good. For simple things, of course, like every library is. And when it's used in a good way, by someone who is aware of the fact what he's doing with the software he has in his hands. That's a really common comparison to choose jQuery and CSS. Because jQuery is doing all the weird things. They're mapping CSS selectors, so you can use selectors either in CSS or jQuery. That's kind of weird, and it may sound insane, right? So jQuery has a lot of stuff which is actually very easily achievable by pure CSS. But also, it has a lot of stuff which cannot be achieved in CSS. For example, the parent selector is not available in CSS. It is specified in a working draft. But on the other hand, it's raising really serious performance issues because all elements on your website need to be loaded. And then the matching rule needs to be evaluated for each child within the element. So if you have 3 paragraphs in one element, in one div, it needs to go 3 times. So it's like a really, really severe performance issue. On the other hand, as I've said, you have a lot of things you can achieve both with jQuery and CSS. So which way to choose? You can use the animate function, or you can use CSS animations. Before, in the past, you weren't able to do that because there was no CSS animation. But now we have all this crazy HTML5, CSS3 hype and amazing tools. And if talking about animation, we have over 80% of support, which is kind of poor on mobile, but it's achievable through pure CSS. So sometimes, when you think about the solutions you want to choose, CSS is the way to go. But why? Because it has native execution. So it's being rendered directly in the browser. The processor is written in C++, so it's faster than JavaScript, which needs to be interpreted. You can have hardware acceleration. For some people, CSS is way more straightforward than JavaScript. Like, for example, imagine me. I'm a designer. So kind of CSS is more appealing than JavaScript. I can look at JavaScript like a year ago, and I would go like, not understand. I don't know what's happening in here. But as I've said, not everything is possible within plain CSS. Like, for example, you can append content with saying content and append some text. But on the other hand, it's very difficult. Also, as I've said, it may be potentially easier for designers. On the other hand, if you're doing all these crazy animations, transformations, you need to think about the degradation issue. Not all of the browsers are supporting the thing you're trying to do. But let's shift from jQuery problem to a different library, because I think that the idea behind this talk is more, it can be targeted toward every library. So, you know Express? Who knows Express? Yeah. Okay. So Express is good, but do you know how it works? That's a really, really basic example. This is like native Node. And you can achieve the same thing with Express. Nice, right? But it's usually easier and better to write native code. So what's wrong with Express? Well, nothing is wrong with Express if you think about the solution and thing you are trying to achieve. Because if you try to install Express, you will see all these dependencies. And you have all these different module authors. So you need to think if the module is maintained, if it's good. There are all these considerations you need to think about. So what's the better approach? First of all, modularity. So separating separation of concerns, separating the presentation layer from logic, separating functionalities to make them work together. But on the other hand, managing their independent nature. Also, clarity. Making the code readable to all. Simplification, but not of the cost of understanding. Considering distributed teamwork also. A lot of us are working for startups, we are working on distributed teams, so having really clear code is very important. And especially when you are working on an open source project, you want people to understand your code. It's not only about commenting, it's also about the readability. Another thing is composition. So we said it's really important to separate logic from layout. But it's also very important to connect these things in a really good way. Because libraries usually are designed to work on their own. They are not necessarily designed to work with each other. Because as a library author, how you can think that, okay, I should work with that and that different library. You're not thinking about it. You're usually thinking, yeah, I'll just make this library, this will solve this issue, and it should just work. That's all. So you should avoid conflicts, like jQuery does. You can use no conflict function to avoid problems with other libraries. A really good example of designing for connection is piping in Unix. So you are sending sender out to sender in by piping. So now, of course, the hello will be copied to your clipboard. Another thing is instrumentation, simplifying debugging. So you can either do the thing on the left, but you can also do the longer, take the longer solution. But why? Well, you probably would like to check your code after you deploy it to production, but you don't want necessarily to have this code within the production code, right? So you can either enable debugging or not. You should also avoid surprising people. People don't like surprises. So don't over-engineer or create newer patterns if there are already patterns established for that. And this is really, really a good example taken from Node for a really, really good pattern. This is everyone knows that. If you're doing Node, you know that you need to return error first. It's really straightforward. So why you should invent your own solution if there's already a solution? You should optimize the speed of how you are coding and how you are reading. So build and ship fast. Prototype before polishing. And be diverse about the solutions you are choosing. There is no single valid and best approach to solving your issue. You need to explore, research the tools that are available, and choose the best one for your job. Maybe it's jQuery, maybe it's Zepto, maybe it's something else. Maybe you should write your own tool, because that's the way to go for you. And there's a really dangerous and false assumption that you shouldn't be writing your own code because you are reinventing the wheel while doing that. And the last thing is extensibility. So thinking about progressive enhancement. You should be using features which are available now. They are well tested. You need to keep in mind the current support. But on the other hand, you need to account the fact that the future might be here faster than you think. So maybe you should consider graceful degradation in some browsers. Maybe you shouldn't be thinking about that it won't work in some browser. That's all about the specification for the project you have. But you need to think about the stuff that's coming in. So it all comes down to not disapprove about the solutions you are using, you are not necessarily even using. Don't disapprove solutions because you don't know them. That's what people do, right? You say, to hell with jQuery, and you are like, yeah, but like 20 people just said that they read the code base. So how you are basing your opinion? Is it the hype opinion you are taking, or do you actually have an argument in here? You need to explore the options. You need to read the code. You need to know the tools you are using, and just to be a better programmer. Thank you. One more thing before we go to questions, please. I don't know if Tiffany is here. Is she here? No. Doesn't matter. But I would really like to thank you for the work you are doing for encouraging people to speak. It's a really great thing we are doing. It's not only about female speakers, but speakers in general. It's really, we are awesome is the best idea I've seen. And whoever here wants to speak, just go see Tiffany or talk to me. And yeah, let's make it awesome. And let's make more people speak about JavaScript. That's all.